Hello, my friends. My name is Chaplain Scott, and I want to thank you for taking the time to join me in this conversation about grief. I serve as a chaplain for the Center for the Arts in Nursing, a partner organization of Beads of Courage. Over the last 19 years, I've had the honor of serving as a chaplain in adult care, hospice care, and pediatric care. In these moments, I don't come to you as an expert on grief, simply as someone who has a story. Someone who has walked through my own grief and alongside many others if they have walked through theirs. And I believe our stories, those I've walked with, my stories, and your stories, though different, are woven together into a larger tapestry of hope and healing. So as we spend this time together, I invite you to take a deep breath, to allow yourself to settle in, and give yourself permission to be present. Presence can be hard sometimes because if you're like me, your mind wanders and you think about all the things that you have to do. Your mind goes, I need to go get groceries, or I need to do laundry, or I've got to do this for one of my children. And it's easy to be present in body, but not in mind. So I want to invite you, if you have a piece of paper somewhere close and a pen, to take and write down what might keep you from being fully present in mind and body for the next few minutes while we talk about grief. As you can see on mine, I've written a couple of things. I've written dishes because I've got to do dishes tonight following dinner. I've got to get ready for tomorrow, and I've got to go in early tomorrow. And last, and one of the most important things is I want to spend a few moments with my daughter before she goes to bed. So I want to give you just a moment to write down some things that might be hindering you and keeping you from being fully present. Take just a moment to do so. Through my journey of grief, I've noticed two important things about grief. There's a rhythm in grief. The first rhythm I find is the rhythm of pause. These are moments when I stop, take a breath, and recognize how far I've come, though I still have much ache of loss within me. The second rhythm is the rhythm of receiving. This is when I acknowledge that I am further along today than I was yesterday, while still reaching for the healing and peace I hope to experience tomorrow. These rhythms don't make grief go away. Pausing and receiving do not negate grief, but what they do is they help to give it shape, meaning, and movement. See, grief is often like a roller coaster. And if you know anything about roller coasters, they don't go in straight lines. Instead, they have peaks and valleys, and sometimes the distance between them can be very wide, and sometimes they can be very close. And so I want to invite you here for just a moment to ponder on this question. Where are you right now on your journey? Are you in a season of pause, noticing the progress that you've made? Or are you in a season of receiving, holding on to the small steps of growth that you've experienced? Take just a moment and reach out and recognize where you are. So what is grief? Well, if you were to ask 7 different people to define grief, you would hear no less than 7 different answers. That's because grief is unique to each of us. Something that grieves me perhaps may not grieve you, or something that grieves you may perhaps not grieve me. But even though it looks different from everyone, there's a common thread. Grief also follows loss. Now, loss can come in many forms. It might be the loss of a job, the loss of an ability, the loss of freedom, the loss of a relationship, or the loss of someone we deeply love. And here's the truth. No matter the loss, your grief is valid. One of the hardest parts of grief is the temptation to compare ourselves to others. We look at someone else and wonder, why do they seem to be moving on and I am not? Or we wonder why are we grieving in this way and others are grieving differently? I want to acknowledge something to you. Two people grieving the same person or event will experience grief differently. Each journey is personal, sacred, and unique. Oftentimes in our world, we compare. We want to be someone else and not who we are. But grief sometimes is the great equalizer, because to move through grief, to heal from grief, to heal within grief, means we have to recognize our own grief and how we are experiencing it. Not how so-and-so is experiencing it, or not how so-and-so is doing, but really asking ourselves, what about me? And knowing that in our experience of the grief, that grief is valid. I want to give you a couple of questions to consider here over the next few moments that maybe invite you to think about your grief and where you are. First, what losses are you carrying right now? Again, there were several losses that I mentioned earlier, but there are many more. But what are you carrying right now? How does your grief feel unique compared to others around you? Not how does it feel for other people, or how do other people feel about your grief and how you're supposed to feel about your grief, but how do you feel about your grief? And where have you felt pressure, maybe from yourself or for others, to grieve in a certain way? Where have you felt that pressure that says you have to fall into this box and be just like everyone else and grieve as they do, or don't grieve as they do, but you have to do it one way because one shoe size fits all? Think about these questions and take just a moment to think about your grief. When I think about grief, I picture it like a patch. See, growing up, my family didn't always have extra. When our clothes developed holes, we didn't throw them out and buy something new. My mom would patch them. Sometimes she would sew the patch on, whereas other times she would iron it on. This here is a small pillow my mom made, and there was a hole in the pillow, and so my mom sewed a patch on the pillow to cover the hole. The hole didn't disappear, but it was covered. The patch served a purpose. At first, when I think about the patches that I wore on my clothes, it felt very uncomfortable. Everybody seemed to notice them. I wanted to hide. I wanted to run away. I wanted to do anything that I could so that no one would see my patches. People sometimes made comments. Often the comments came from those who never wore patches, or those who tried to defer the attention away from their own patches. It didn't feel fair. I didn't choose the patch. It was simply what was given to me. But with time, something changed. The patch began to blend in. It became part of my clothing. It became part of my story. I also started noticing that others had patches too, even if I'd never seen them before. And now and then, I'd be reminded of the hole underneath. But the reminder wasn't as sharp, it wasn't as painful as before. Grief is a lot like that. It doesn't erase the hole that loss left within us. But over time, it gives us a patch, something that covers, protects, and helps us carry on. The patch doesn't mean loss is gone. It simply means we found a way to live within it. So what does your patch look like? If grief is a patch, what does it look like for you? Is it like this one? It has a sunflower on it? Or I guess it's a sunflower. Is it solid color, maybe? Does it have some type of design on it? What does your patch feel like right now? Is it raw and new? Or is it worn and in time seems to blend in with your other parts of your clothes? How have others responded to your patch? Have you felt supported, judged, or misunderstood? And what patches have you noticed in others? How has that shaped the way you understand grief? I want to give you a few moments to think about those questions. Think about your patch. What does it look like? How have others responded to your patch? What patches have you noticed on others that have helped to shape your understanding of grief as you have experienced it? So what does all this mean? I started off talking about this idea of grief having a rhythm of pause and receiving. And then I talked about grief being like a patch and how it has its own unique look to it and how it impacts us and how others see our patch and how we see our patch. So what does all this mean? I like to think of it in this way. It means grief has a purpose. It helps to give shape to our loss. It helps to remind us of what was meaningful. It creates space for us to remember, to mourn, and to move forward in our own time. It also means we must be patient. Patient with ourselves and patient with others. Your patch doesn't look like mine, and my patch doesn't look like yours, but each one has value. The key is not to rush the process. Patches take time to settle into the fabric of our clothing. Grief, in the same way, takes time to settle into the fabric of our lives. How can you offer yourself more patience in your grief? How can you extend that same patience to others? As we close our time together, I want to remind you of something. Your grief is valid. and your story matters. Whether you are in a season of pause, noticing the distance you've traveled, a season of receiving, holding on to the small steps of healing, or perhaps a season of uncertainty, where pause and receiving are not experienced, you are not alone. We are all wearing patches. Some are fresh, some are worn, some still ache, but together they make up the beautiful, resilient human tapestry of healing and hope. Thank you for allowing me to share this time with you. And I invite you to hold one final question. What is one gentle step you can take today to honor both your grief and your healing? I'm Chaplain Scott.